Hello and welcome back to Building Microservice with Go and episode 6. And I'm going to apologize because, I got off a plane and I've got a little bit of a cold. So if I sound kind of like Barry White with a cold, then that's why. Today's video I'm going to do a little bit shorter maybe than normal. I do apologize, but you definitely don't want to be listening to me croaking for too long. But what we're going to look at is kind of adding some validation to our API that we've been building. So we're going to start looking at a validation system, and we're going to use a tool called Go Validator. Validator just allows us to add strut validation and things like that. You'll see how all of this works, but it's really nice for kind of, just doing this kind of stuff, adding some nice validation to our APIs, make them a little bit user-friendly, but also got to think about ourselves. So kind of one of the most common things you will find when looking at vulnerabilities, and if we look at, say, OWASP's website, you'll see that, well, let's zoom that up, but the top 10 vulnerabilities on OWASP, and I'm just looking at a blog post here from Cloudflare, but we've got things like injection, so SQL code injection, data exposure, broken access control, security misconfiguration, cross-site scripting, insecure deserialization. So things like that, and combined with being able to do injection, vulnerabilities around that, it's really, really important that you sanitize your data inputs. So two good reasons why to validate. One, actually makes your application more secure because we're validating and sanitizing our inputs. And number two, well, it gives us a really nice way of kind of managing our data structs and also being able to give nice error messages back to people. So let's go. So what we're going to do. So this is the example that we were looking at last time, and again I'll put the link down there, and if you missed last week's video, I'll put something up there. But we've got this kind of data model, and again, just to kind of recap for folks, this model isn't actually connected up to a database. We're doing some pretty basic stuff here. We've literally just got a list of objects, but in terms of how it would function, pretty much exactly the same as if I was wiring this up to a database. I'm defining my strut, which is my data type, and I'm just adding some methods to return the lists of products, add products, and things like that. So I'm writing an abstraction around the underlying data implementation. So this is the product that we would like to validate. So how do we do this? So what we're going to do is we're going to use, at the very basic, we're going to use some strut tags, and we can specify which are valid fields and things like that. What we will also do is we're going to add some custom validation types, and I think it's going to be pretty neat. So we're going to do all of that with Go Validator. So let's take a look at Go Validator. And again, I'm going to put the link down here, so you don't need to worry about this too much right now. So Go Validator. So it's very basic. What we do is we have this validate method, and we strut method on the validator, and we pass it an instance of our strut. And what it's going to do is it's going to return us a list of errors which relate to the validation on that strut. In order to kind of determine what those validations are, well, we can just use these tags here. So we can say, for example, we can add the validate tag for required. So in this instance, the user strut first name will be required. Same with last name, but we can also do some more complicated validation. So for example, with age, what I'm saying is that age is an unsigned integer, so it's a positive number, and it's got to be greater than 0. GTE, it's greater than equal to 0, or it's got to be less than equal to 130. For validating, say, an email field, well, the validator also has this special strut type called email, and we can validate that this string corresponds to the correct RFC email type. And we've got things like IP addresses and all sorts. We'll dig through a few of these, but it's a really nice package. So let's go. Let's take a look. All right. So what we need to do is we're going to kind of add a validate method on our data type. So we can say func p, and we're going to add it to our product. I'm going to call it validate, and it's just going to return an error. So for the time being, we're just going to return nil. Now, what I need to do in order to do the validation is I need to construct a validator. Now I can construct that validator outside as kind of a global kind of data object, because I might want to register a load of custom stuff. It makes sense to keep it in one place. Or for convenience, I'm just going to put it into my validate function right now. Okay, so we've got a validator, and we're going to say, let's have a look at what the package name is. Okay, validator. So I'm going to need to copy this input as well. So it's going to be validator dot new. Oh, and there we go. Excellent. So then what we can do is we can validate a strut. So I can say validate dot strut, and then the strut that I want to validate, well, I'm just going to pass it a reference to myself. And because strut returns me an error message, I can actually just return that. So now let's look at how we can add those validation structures to our product strut. So name, we want name of the product to be a required field. So I can add a strut tag. So in the same way as I'm doing my strut tags for JSON, I can add these validate tags. And I'm just going to say that this is required. We'll leave the others blank for the time being. So let's test this out. Now, I'm just going to write a very quick unit test, just literally as a proof of concept to kind of test these things out. I am going to look at testing in more depth, so I'm not going to write full unit tests. It's literally just some stuff that'll help me show you this example and write the code. Okay, so products test.go, and that's package data. And then we're going to just create a simple test. So func test checks validation or something. It doesn't really matter. As I say, I'm not really interested in writing a full unit test for this right now. I'm just going to use this to test out my validation function. So if I create a product, and then what I want to be able to do on my product is I want to call validate. So I'm going to get an error. So I can say error is p dot validate, like that, right? And then I'm going to write in my test, I'm going to say if error is not equal to nil, then t dot fatal error. All right. Just really simple. So let's run that test. So we run that test and it fails as expected, because you can see here that it says error field validation for name failed for the required tag. So this is pretty cool. So I've not had to do anything really. Let's have a look at what I've wired up there. But I've literally just wired up the validator, and I've just said validate a strut, which is myself, and then adding these tags. So we can add some more tags. So let's have a look. Well, I want my name is required. I don't really have any requirements for name, but I could set a minimum or a maximum length, but let's just keep it simple for now. And then price. Well, price is a required field, and I'm going to say that price has to be greater than 0, because that makes sense. Price has to be greater than 0. And let's give that a sort of a whirl, I suppose. Run our test again, and you can see that we've got 2 validation error messages now. So we've got the validation for name failed, and we've got the validation price failed. So I can just check that this is all working. So I'm going to add name. I'm going to say Nix. Doesn't really matter. And I'm going to add a price, and I'm just going to say whatever, $1, £1, €1, and we'll run that test. Okay, so everything's passing now, right? So that's the validation in practice. Is really, really easy. But what about this? What about this SKU? So a SKU is kind of like a product ID, I suppose. It's not like an object ID like the database ID. It would be like the unique ID for the product, which could contain various different things like color codes and stuff like that. So how do we validate a SKU? Because a SKU is, well, it's very custom, it's different things. So what we can do with this validator package is we can add our own custom validation functions. So I'm going to add validate, and I'm going to say required, because it is. And I'm, well, actually just going to use SKU. Now, SKU doesn't exist, but we can create our own validation functions, and we can wire this up. So let's have a look. How do we create our own validation function? Well, to create our own validation function, again, we can do validate, and then if we look at the validate, it has a function called register validation. So let's take a check of that in the docs. Register validation. So this is going to use a custom tag name, and it's going to use this custom function. So I can define my own function, which is going to do the validation, and all I have to do is return true or false. So let's see how we can wire that up for our SKU. So I'm not going to do that. I'm going to do that. I'm pasting it in from the docs, and I'm going to call this validate SKU. Okay. So then what I want to do for my SKU is going to look like this. It's going to have, let's say, a number of different letters separated by more letters and more letters. So very, very basic. So we want to ensure that the SKU is in this format. So how do we do that? Well, what we can do is we can just use a regexp. So regexp, so re equals regexp dot must compile, and we can define our regexp. So our regexp is going to be A to Z plus dash A to Z plus dash A to Z plus. So what we're doing is we're saying that we've got these 3 parts separated by this dash here, and the parts must be in the format of alphabetic, so between A and Z, and there must be 1 or more. So it's a pretty straightforward regex. And then what we can do is we can just check that. So we're going to say re dot find all string, and it's going to be fl dot field string. So fl field string is the validator here is returning this field level. And if I quickly just jump into the definition for that, you can see that it's an interface and it has all of these things such as the parent, field name, etc., etc. So to get the value, what I do is I do this field to get the value, and then I'm just casting that into a string. Of course, field could be very, very many different types. So what this is going to do is this is going to return me a slice of string. So I'm just going to call that matches. Now, with this, what I'm we're just going to say the count, we want all. So matches, why am I getting this all as an array? Well, what I'm doing is that I could actually have passed this a string. It could be multi-line, it might have multiple SKUs in it. When I get the matches, if there's more than one, what I can do is I can say, so if len matches does not equal 1, whoops, a daisy, return false, otherwise return true. So if we don't have exactly one match, then the validation is going to fail, and we're just going to return true on there. So let's bounce over to our test and give this a little bit of a whirl. So let's run my test. And well, what have we got? Not enough arguments and call to register validation. Yeah, well, yeah. Would help if I wired it up, wouldn't it? So we're going to wire it up. What is the name of the custom validation function? We've called it SKU. And what is the function to execute when it finds this tag? We're doing validate SKU. So now let's run our test. So running our test, and it says it's failed. So validation failed for SKU. And that's because, well, we don't have a SKU. So let's add a SKU, but let's add a bad SKU, ABS. Well, let's just try that for a start. And we can run that. And again, it's failing because the SKU is not in the right format. So let me put something in the right format, run our test, and now it's working. So this is a really, really kind of neat way, very, very quick way that I've just written that sort of that validation. So we've got all of that nice validation now. So let's start wiring this up onto our API that we created last week. So our API, if we kind of bounce back, then we had these put and these post methods. And what we were doing was we added this middleware for both put and post, and that's going to validate the object which is passed to it. So if we go in there and look at our middleware, you can see that what we're doing is we're creating a product, we're converting that product from JSON, and if that works and all is good, then we're returning the context. But now what we can do is we can validate the product. So we can sanitize that input, right? So we can just do prod dot validate. That's going to return us an error. And then we can say if error is not equal to nil, well, I don't want to call the next thing through in the chain. I just want to fail. So let me just do a little copy pasta, because always the quickest way. We can do, I'm just going to do error validating product in my logs, and I'm going to print out the actual validation message. And then I can do HTTP error, and I can say error validating product. But let's actually pass the error message to the output, because it's a pretty sane error. It's nothing that's going to cause any sort of risks on there. Exactly the sort of the definition that we'll have in our Swagger API, which is a nice segue to the next video, which will be coming midweek, because I'm going to show you how to start documenting your APIs with Swagger. But for now, let's just write that error message out. So format.s printf blah 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 blah, and I want the error. All right, let me just format that. It doesn't make any functional difference, but it makes difference to my sanity and the readability of the code. So if the validation fails on our product, we are going to return an HTTP error. It's going to be a bad request because the input is invalid. What else could we have used? No, I think bad request is pretty much the right thing to use in this instance. And well, I suppose we should probably just give this a go. Maybe. Let's see if it works. Go run main.go. Okay, so create myself a new terminal. So I'm going to do curl localhost 9090. Let's just check our API. Of course, I don't recall what we wired those up as. Okay, just on the root path there. Okay, so our API is working. So now let's try posting something to our API and see what happens. So I'm just gonna post a new I'm gonna create a new product, and it's going to be let me see, let's just call we'll add a name, and we're just going to call it new product, because imagination is flowing wild. And let's see what happens when we do this. So let's have a look. What are we complaining about, curl? Oh, of course, my bad. Data. But look at this now. So we're getting the error message back. So let me just put curl in verbose mode. But we're getting an error message back from our API service, and it's saying bad request. So what are we getting back? Well, it's saying error validating product, key product price, error field validation for price. Okay, so my price failed on the GT tag. Well, it's better than nothing. It would have been nicer if we could have had an error message which says price should be a minimum of X amount, and we can do that if we did all custom validation. So we can do that. I mean, let's just add a price. So price for our new product, and if I make sure that that's JSON. Just a quick mention of Harrison in the chat there. He's saying that Golang's ID, IntelliJ's Golang, 100% agree. That is a really nice IDE. Everything's a little bit broken. The new version of Go Please, which just dropped this weekend, 0.3, seems to be improving things a lot, but still having a few problems here and there. Anyway, so price. So let's add our price, and it's going to be £1.23, and we can run that. So now, well, we're still getting a bad request, but it's telling us that the product SKU, error validation SKU is required. Okay, so I can add my SKU, and well, let's first add a bad SKU. And it's still saying that SKU is bad. Okay, that makes sense. So we can say def ghi and run that. And then that's all working. So now we've added that validation to our product API. Very, very simple, just a very few kind of steps there by using the validate package and just kind of using these strut tags, which I think is really nice, really neat. Again, recapping, validating the input is good for your security because it ensures that the values are within the bounds of what you're expecting, but also it's really nice to be able to present a useful error message to your users because, you know, it's easy to make mistakes. If you've been watching the series, you'll see I make plenty. But I mean, we're all done there. We're pretty good. So let me just check in that code. Likey so, added. Push it, and what I'll do as soon as I hit the stop on this video is I will make sure that I update the link just down below there with the source code, but it's in the same GitHub repository as normal. Just type in the password for my SSH key, and we are golden. So I want to say thank you as always for watching. I'm looking forward to taking you on to the next part midweek. We'll do kind of 8 p.m. GMT on Wednesday, I think. And we're going to look at Swagger. How can we start documenting our RESTful APIs using the Open API standard or the kind of the Swagger-based standard? Some really, really nice tools in Go to be able to do this. As always, I want to say thank you for tuning in. If you like these series, please like, subscribe, share them with your friends and colleagues. I really appreciate all of that. And until next time, I'm going to say goodbye.